Alright guys, welcome back. Where we last left off, which was somewhere around here in the code, we last defined the style rule for jumbo p, which is the p tag inside of the jumbo aside here. And basically what I've done since then that's different, that you guys haven't seen in video, is that I've added these style rules here, okay? I won't bore you guys with the details of watching me type it, but I will explain the important parts of these style rules so you guys get the concepts of how it interacts with the next phase of this tutorial, which is going to be the jQuery, or the JavaScript side of programming, okay? Now, I've once again gone ahead and I've abstracted away some processes. What I've done here that's not in video is I've npm installed a dependency, okay? I've used npm, which was shown earlier in the video. I did npm install jQuery, okay? That's the one. I'm not going to run it again because I already did it, guys. And it installed a jQuery dependency, which, remember, it's a framework that wraps around JavaScript. And this framework is used to make life easier when it comes to writing JavaScript. jQuery is a JavaScript library designed to simplify the client-side scripting of HTML, okay? So it's going to give us a bunch of functionality that's going to make life easier when it comes to dealing with HTML in JavaScript, all right? So this dependency gets loaded first, very important, precedence, remember guys, and then after that, this file will be loaded, this other dependency, which is the main.js file, okay? This is actually going to contain the code, the jQuery code necessary to make this menu work, okay? In conjunction with these styles, okay, with these classes, okay? Which can be added and removed to elements, right? We see here a class closed and open that appears to be on the nav, okay? These classes probably, you see top, it's when these classes get applied to the nav and the button, they move, they trigger a rule to change the top. See, and if we go higher up, we can see, more importantly, right here we have a global, this wildcard selector, okay? What does that mean? All right, this wildcard selector means that everything inside of this selector is going to be targeted. It's children, those children's children, everything. And we're applying to everything a transition, okay? A transition property that defines what properties are going to transition. If it's going to be a transition of color, if it's going to be a transition of background, if it's going to be a transition of width, font size, or if it's all. In this case, it's all. Keep in mind, all is a costly option because it's everything, but it's also the easiest one because you don't have to think about what you're going to change, okay? When it comes to certain CSS rules, okay? And you guessed it, guys, these classes are probably going to be applied to the element that's performing the work, right? The element that's moving, right? So let's go ahead, let's continue with this jQuery so I can better articulate that you guys can see more or less how this all happens, okay? So in here we have an anonymous, first and foremost, we have an anonymous function definition, all right? An anonymous function is just a function that has no name. It's a function, an anonymous self-calling function in this case. See how even though it's being defined, it's wrapped by these parentheses, which is what makes it anonymous. This right here, this parentheses is what makes this anonymous, okay guys? And then this call right here, immediately after we define the function, which by the way takes a parameter, this function is called, right? So it's like saying let a equal a function and then a something, right? It's like we're calling it immediately, right? It's getting defined and then it gets called, right? So after it gets called with a parameter that's being passed to the jQuery object, which here is available as a $. So even though what this construct is saying is that at first upon first execution, upon the order of execution, jQuery isn't a $. All right, it's available as this first, allegedly. That's what it's saying, okay? So it's taking jQuery as this first and then enabling it to become that, and thus making it shorter so we don't have to type so much, right? We could just use the $, which I love the $, notation. It's super easy in my book. I love it. That's how I use jQuery. Sometimes you'll find yourself having to deal with this, specifically if you're using WordPress, but there's ways around it. Just remember, it's all about the order in which the function is being executed and what's being passed to it, okay? So we're gonna have a plugin. This construct right here, this fn method, available on the jQuery object, anything that comes after this is a plugin definition. So this thing we're defining here, this tab toggle namespace, is basically a function that takes options, okay? And the options that it takes can be expressed here as settings. We're gonna say let settings. So within this block, the let keyword is saying this variable exists within this block scope right here inside of this function. Settings are going to be a method call. Let's see here on the jQuery object to a method called extend, and we're gonna pass an object to this. So these options, these settings are gonna be extendable, right? According to this method, extend. Now, what does extend mean in jQuery? Guys, this is something I can't walk you through every single function, or else we'd be here all day, but you have to leverage, as a developer and as a programmer, you have to leverage references, and you have to go out there and find out. If you're not sure what something does, read about it, find out. See here, extend. When two or more object arguments are supplied to extend, properties from all the objects are added to the target object. Arguments that are null or undefined are ignored. If only one argument is supplied to extend, this means that the target argument was omitted. In this case, the jQuery object itself is assumed to be the target. Okay, so the jQuery object itself is assumed to be the target. So this object itself, whatever this is going to operate on, itself is going to take some options, and we're going to extend them. So the options are going to be available are links, and that's going to be an array, an empty array. That's going to be the default value of that option. And then we're going to have also another option called transition speed, and that's going to default to 1s string, a string that has these values here. Okay, these characters, and once we've defined that, we can continue on passing this to this extend method the options parameter itself. So the options are going to be extended. See how this thing consumes the options parameter and then extends it via calling this method within the object. So let's see, I want to try something out. If this parameter is being extended within the same object here that this plugin is being defined under, that means that I can access those options as they're being passed, but it's not being passed yet. So let's see here. This doesn't even need to be inside of here. The document doesn't need to be ready for this to run just yet. This could be out here, actually. Yeah, because all of this can be applied. We could say that we have some options here, or that are links. We have link 1, 2, and 3. And then we can also have a transition speed, but the options are extendable, so I don't need to declare that option. Okay, if it's really being extended, then I don't need to declare it, because here I'm defining a default. So when the document is ready, I have this object that are my options that I can pass to this definition here. So this would be called on my element, remember? Because this is what I want this plugin to execute under the context of this element. I want this element to the code that I'm writing here, that I'm defining, I want this plugin to execute within the scope of this jQuery selection object, of this jQuery object that I'm going to select here. So I'm going to say this object that I want, the main navigation, this element here, is what I will call tab toggle on. and I will pass it options. This element here is what I want the contents of this plugin to work on. This element here is what I want the contents of this plugin, the code in here, to work on. Does that make sense, guys? So these options here is this here, right? Do you understand? Do you see that, guys? And we are tethering it through this call to the extend on the object itself, on the jQuery object itself. So, by that definition, logic stands that if this code executes, and this object is tethered to this object here, this parameter is tethered to this object here, then we should see that this, even though it wasn't passed here to the plugin initially, it has a default and therefore will be defined. We can test that, okay? So we're going to console.log that out. We're going to see, have that output, and indeed it does. So this is the gist of how your plugins are going to accept input and provide output. Remember, guys, we talked about input and output. Here is the input to your parameter, to your plugin, and here's the output, the work being done. So knowing this, we can continue and we can go ahead and define. We can define. I'm just gonna leave a comment here to kind of as a placeholder for my thoughts. We can define this plugin functionality, guys. So what do we want to happen? Okay. So initially there's nothing there, it's empty, right? So we want to define the element that we are currently targeting, which we can tap into using the this keyword. Remember, all the code in here lives within the context of this function, tab toggle. So the keyword this refers to the context. It bubbles up. Remember, they're scoping up. The scope is bubbling up. We're in here, right? The scope is going to bubble up to the next object. This refers to main navigation in this context, based on how this tab toggle plugin is being called. So this is our current target now. We're referring to whatever this is, which is in this case main navigation. That's going to be our current target. Okay. Now we need to define nav. What's cool about jQuery, guys, is that if we haven't selected an element on the page, we can still create one, like so. It's the literal definition of an element. So if it doesn't exist on the page, you can still reference that element by just creating it dynamically with jQuery on the fly. And we're gonna need a toggle, right? A button that's gonna toggle our navigation, right? So we've defined our elements. Next, we need to create the navigation markup. And we're going to do this by utilizing the definitions that we just created and calling some jQuery methods on them, because after all, they are jQuery objects. Remember, this refers to a jQuery object in this context, the way it's being called. So I want to take this, which is the main navigation, and I want to add to it the nav element we dynamically created earlier. But on top of all this, I want to chain yet another method to that element, to the nav element, and I want to add a class to it of nav, so that I know that that's there and I can refer to it later. Alright, guys, let's see if this is true, guys. Let's see if we have a nav now. Look at that. Look at that. There appears to be inside of the main navigation element a navigation element with the class nav. Now it's black because I have some styles already previously defined, guys. Remember, I don't want to bore you with the details of setting this background black and that border radius to whatever amount of pixels. But while we're at it, let's review. Well, actually, I'm gonna continue with the JavaScript, with the building of this element to not lose track, and then we'll review the intricacies of the CSS and why it works that way. Okay, so now we have a nav. Okay, so we can continue. All right, now we can apply more options. So we have to now take these options that we're passing to this object, and we've defined the navigation element, but amongst these options that we've passed to this plugin, to this object, is we have some links, right? So links appears to be a list, and if we have some links and it's a list, we're probably gonna want to first see if that list has stuff, right? So first we're gonna want to see if that list inside of that settings object, remember, because we named it that, and we use the dot notation because this is an object that's being extended, an options object. If settings.list, and now we're at the list level, we've tapped into it, that links, I'm sorry, links is the name of that property, which is a list. List has a method of called length, where we could take the length of that list. So let's say if that list has items in it, and if that list is an instance of array, then we're going to console log ice cream. Alright? So what I'm saying is, if links is really a list, if it's an instance of, well, actually what I'm really saying is, if links has a length greater than 0, and links is in fact an instance of an array, which it appears to be here, a literal instance of an array, we're going to console log ice cream. Do we have ice cream? No, we do not. Why do we not have ice cream? Why do we not have ice cream? Length, settings, links. Alright guys, just gonna pause the video, figure this out real quick. Alright guys, and we're back. Sorry about that. Had a bit of a little syntax issue. Make sure you type correctly, guys. Alright, so we have ice cream. We know that it's that we're dealing with a list, and we know, well, we know that the item that we're dealing with is an instance of an array, and we know that it has a length greater than 0, which is why we're getting ice cream. So now that we can get ice cream, let's perform the work that needs to be done here. Okay, so if we have links, first we need to know that the nav is closed. That's our default. We want it to start closed. Okay, and then we're gonna open it. So what we're gonna do is, for each link that's available, we're gonna execute a function on that link. Okay, this function takes a parameter I, which is gonna be the index or position of that link in the array. Okay, which we're gonna get here using the index of method. Now if that link that we're getting is an instance of jQuery, we're gonna do something specific. But if it's not, we're gonna do something else. Particularly if it's a string, which it is in this, it is not in this case. Okay. Type of but if it is a string, which we can test right now, we want to do something. So if it's a string, what do we want to do? If it's a string, we want to create a link for that menu item, right? And this link is going to have a class called navLink, which already has some associated styles, remember. And that link is going to contain some text. Guys, you can chain your methods in jQuery in this fashion. If you feel like you're running out of space, you can do this where you flow them over, you know, so it's easier to read. This link is going to have some text, and it's going to be the text passed within that link, the link option. So you get that text and pass it to it. Alright, so we have the link. Okay, now we need to add that link to the navigation. Alright, I'm not gonna go ahead and write the edge case for if these strings are jQuery objects. You guys can take that from the example yourself if you want to continue studying some more. But you guys get the idea. Right here I'm defining some conditions that are being triggered depending on the input provided to the options of my plugin. So if one of the options in my plugin contains strings, an array of strings, I have a case, I have a condition that's going to handle that, which is this one. All right, and we can test that out. Whoop, look at that, an error. Let's see, cannot read property index of undefined on line 22. Why would this be undefined? Because we're not getting the one that, because it's links, not link. That's why we're not getting the option that we want. Okay, so look at that, guys. Look at that, we have some links and they appear to have some text in them. Okay, but we're not done yet. We have the links, they have some text in it. What's going on with the toggle? Gotta add it. Alright, so we're gonna add it. Remember, we have the toggle defined up there as a button. It was created dynamically. See? Toggle, it's a button. We can refer to that toggle. We could add some text to it. And Yeah, I'm gonna have to copy this one, guys. This is a hamburger text. I don't have a key for that one, so we're just gonna. Oh, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Yeah, here it is. Alrighty. Just drop that in there, a little hamburger. Alright, so we added the toggle. Alright. Look at that, we have a toggle. And that text is totally not working. Wow. That's a first. Interesting. Alright guys, I'll be right back. Alright guys, just had to go and find that HTML entity code for the hamburger. In case you're curious, that's what it looks like. Alright, so we have hamburger. Okay. Now, we need to register. You notice when I click on this hamburger, nothing happens. Why? Okay. What makes the menu slide out? When we click here, what makes this navigation slide up? Okay. What makes this navigation slide out is this class here. You see the closed class? Alright. Let's give you a tour of that CSS I pasted in here. So, we're applying a transition that's universal to all elements inside of the main navigation ID attributed element, okay? And we're doing this by using the wildcard selector, which is the asterisk in CSS. Anything, and I mean anything inside of main navigation, any element, class, ID, unique or otherwise, it's gonna get this rule, okay? That's how we're able to apply a universal transition range, like what properties are we defining to transition, a duration, and a transition type, if it's easing, if it's linear, you know, we're able to define that here, and we're able to, more importantly, change it in only one place. Okay, this is why there's a wildcard transition being applied here, because now whenever we pass this property of the speed, the transition speed, we just have to modify CSS in one location on one element. We don't have to go crazy figuring out what element has a transition within that element. No, we just leverage the wildcard selector. In here further, we have, based on how the nav is structured, we have here a nav, which this element is relative to the flow of the page. That means relatively this element exists here on the page. First comes the header, it's inside the header, and etc, etc. It's the first most element here. Now within it, positioned absolutely is this button. Okay, when you have a parent element that's positioned relatively, any child element within it, you see how this is inside of nav, it's a child of the nav. Any element that's a child of a relative element and it's positioned absolutely, when you define left, top, right, or bottom, that is going to be constrained to the boundaries of its parent. Okay, so if I say left 0, the boundary of the parent, you see how this, for demonstration purposes, has a red border. You see how this has a red border, the nav? Just gonna open it by changing this class, opened. Okay, see how it opened when I change the class name? It's because this class changes a value. Okay, the opened, well, actually no, I'm sorry, the class doesn't have CSS rules tethered to it, but in the jQuery here, where we will, let's see here. Oh, I'm sorry guys, I'm just all over the place right now. Just make sure before I get a better idea. Alright, see here we have close and we have open. You see how one rule is changing? Okay, the top value. That's what causes the menu to open and close. Alright, the fact that it has a transition and the fact that top is being changed when this class changes here, the value of it, that's what makes the menu move. Okay, the button is positioned there outside of the border because we said that this has a position relative, and the child, which is the button element inside of the nav with a position relative, is positioned absolutely with a bottom, or I'm sorry, with a top of 60 pixels. Therefore, it's exactly 60 pixels from the top, which is why it appears to be underneath. Okay, this is a concept. I'll probably make a separate video on this notion altogether, because it's an important concept in CSS. You want to know what position relative means with respect to position absolute and how those elements are going to interact when they're laid out on the DOM. Okay, but yeah, guys, this is essentially what's going on here. So now we just need to code that interface, the part where this changes from close to open on click. Okay, notice that's the event we're clicking, and that's what we want to happen when we click. We want that code to execute. So we're gonna come out here. We're gonna say toggle, which is that button dot click. All right, guys, just wanted to save some typing there. So that toggle button on click, we're gonna execute this function, right? And we're gonna pass it this e parameter. All right. What you need to know about the click method, guys, is that this is an event. Click is an event. It's an action that's occurring. You're clicking. Okay, it's an event. When that event occurs, we can pass to the function that's gonna get called when that event occurs. We could pass to it this parameter called e, which is short for, you guessed it, event. And that object has some stuff in it that we could use. In this case here, we're not using it, but we could say, remember how here we needed to define the current target? E has e.current target. See, it exposes some properties that can be useful with respect to that element that the event is occurring on. Okay, just a quick little tip for you guys. All right, so once we click on the toggle button, we're gonna say if nav, the nav element, remember nav element, I'm sorry guys, let's see here, nav element, if it has the class closed, take it off, add the class open. Else, when we click on the toggle, if nav doesn't, else it doesn't have the class closed, it has the class opened, we're going to take off open and we're going to add close. After that, we're going to check, this is all for the links, guys, bear this in mind, this is all for links. This is the work that we're doing for links. From here to here, it's just processing the links passed to that plugin method. Okay, transition speed, this is all the code we need for transition speed, which is a rather simple option to process. All we're saying is if transition speed is in fact a string and the string is in fact has some characters is greater than 0, then we're gonna grab, this is a complicated selector we're building here, we're gonna grab the current target's ID, which is the ID of this, and we're gonna add that wildcard selector. Remember this rule, guys, where we get to specify the speed of the transition? That's what we're gonna tap into with CSS, and we're gonna modify that, and we're gonna add our transition speed here. And that's it, guys. That's pretty much the gist of how this thing works. And there you go. See, it takes 3 seconds because we're passing our own speed. We're gonna make it quicker, really quick, half a second quick. We could add another page here. And there you have it, guys. Your dynamic jQuery plugin for a menu. Guys, it's been a real pleasure teaching this course to you. And once again, if you found the contents of this course valuable, hit that subscribe button. please, I do this on my spare time. I love teaching. It helps me become better at what I love to do. And yeah, hit that subscribe button, sign up for notifications. I'll be doing more video tutorials. I might do something with WordPress next time, I don't know. Or I might focus more on HTML, CSS, maybe just CSS and HTML. Who knows? But what I do know is if you click that bell, you will find out. So click the bell, subscribe. Thank you guys. Leave a comment below if you guys want me to clarify any more topics or go into more detail. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you guys might have about anything I might have glossed over, or if you guys need me to clarify more things. Thank you very much. Once again, this is Coding Companion. Have a great day, guys. Enjoy your jQuery menu.